Top diplomats from the US and Russia have met in Saudi Arabia as they work to restore ties between the two nations and begin negotiating an end to the war in Ukraine. Our North America correspondent, Carrington Clark, has been following the meeting and joins us now from Washington. Carrington, thanks for joining us. The US is claiming this is a significant step, but what's actually come out of the meeting?
Yeah, good morning. Well, it is a significant departure from the policy of the previous administration, which was to isolate Russia on the global stage. There were no direct talks. They were trying to punish them economically through wide-ranging sanctions and trying to hurt them on the battlefield with huge amounts of military aid to Ukraine. Now, Donald Trump campaigned hard on changing the dynamic between Russia and the United States. He promised he could end the war within Ukraine within a day. That obviously hasn't happened, but he has allowed this particular meeting to take place. But there really haven't been significant steps seeming to come out of this particular meeting. Instead, it is now being portrayed as just the first of a process of meetings that we will now see. The America has already agreed to another meeting with Russia, although we don't have a timeline on it. But even still, the Secretary of State for the United States, Rubio, said this is significant and it should not be seen as a sidelining of European or Ukrainian partners, but instead about trying to get these two major powers back on the same page.
It's been 3.5 years since there's been any sort of regularized contact between the United States and Russia, and in some cases between any of the participants in this conflict and Russia. So the goal of today's meeting was to follow up on the phone call the president had a week ago and begin to establish those lines of communication. The work remains. Today is the first step of a long and difficult journey, but an important one.
So that's Marco Rubio there. And Carrington, it is notable that neither Ukraine or any other representative from Europe was in attendance. What does this tell us about the state of the Western alliance? There are growing concerns in Europe about that fracturing relationship between the continent and the US.
Yeah, absolutely. And you could tell that this meeting came as a surprise to the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, who was meeting with the Turkish president. He said these decisions should not be taken behind the back of Ukraine. In Europe, we are seeing it appears to be a fracturing between the alliance about exactly how to respond to this new position of the United States. And although, again, the US is saying they're not trying to sideline anyone, it is clear that Europe needs to navigate a different landscape now that Donald Trump is in charge. We saw that hastily arranged meeting yesterday in Paris between European partners. There is now going to be a second one for some of the other European countries who weren't able to make the first. And it seems very clear that Europe knows that it now needs to change its dynamic if it wants to navigate the security situation in Europe. Obviously, it is of greater concern to Europe what happens in Ukraine than the United States. As Donald Trump keeps saying, there's an ocean between the United States and Europe and the war. But this has changed the nature of that relationship, and we wait to see what happens in coming days and weeks about what it means for that alliance.